Okay, we've been going through our Love and Logic toolkit. So we've talked about several of the tools. We haven't quite gotten all of them yet. We've still got a few weeks left in the summer. So hopefully you've had a few opportunities to experiment, to try a few of these out. And remember, it's not that any of these are going to work perfectly all the time. They are like tools. You have a situation and you go through the tool bag and you pull out the one you think will work now and you use it. And if it does, that's great. If it doesn't, put it back and you grab a different one. So like I said, hopefully you've had some chances to use some of those. Last week, we talked about this idea of helping our kids solve their own problems, helping them to own them, helping them to work through those problems. We talked about this 5-step process. You lead with empathy. Oh man, what a problem. That must be a really big problem you're dealing with. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. Well, would you like to know what some other people would do about it? And you give several different options and ask them, how do you think that would work? And then they can kind of verbalize how they think that would work. Or even if they say, well, I don't know, that's all right. They're still having to process what those options are. And finally, at the end, you say, well, I know that you'll solve it however is best for you. Let me know how it goes. So anybody get to use that this week? Practice it a little bit?
I did, but it turned out to be not enough time. Like the decision had to happen. And so I discovered that depending on the kid, it might not work in a time crunch.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about the tools. Sometimes this one requires some time to think through the solutions, being able to decide how I'm going to handle this. And you're right, there are times where you just don't have that opportunity. And so it's not so much that you're going to start working through that process. That's where you might start giving options. Would this be better or would this be better for you? Just go straight to the punch with some of those options. But then, we started off with those choices, giving kids the opportunity to control their environment, their life with choices. And what we're going to do is give them choices that make us deliriously happy. Well, what we're going to find is, in fact, we'll see that again tonight, the power in each of these, a bunch of these techniques is the power of choice. That's the one here too. You're going to lay out several choices and then give them the opportunity to make those choices. As much as you can do that, rather saying, this is what you're going to do, then the more successful you'll typically be when it comes to developing that relationship and giving your kids the skills that they can do it. I got to tell you 2 stories on this one, and both of them involve our youngest daughter, Lori. Lori, I told you that you're using Love and Logic whenever your kids start using it on you. And so this happened back whenever she was, I don't know, she was, I guess, 5, 6, something like that. Lori, Angela was out in the garage organizing some things, and Lori was off to the side, and she was kind of doing something, and Angela really couldn't tell until she really kind of focused over there. And what Lori had done is she had gotten some crayons, and she was marking on a white bookcase that was out in the garage. And so Angela said, oh, Lori, that is so sad. What are you going to do about it? Well, Lori had been through the routine once or twice before, so she just jumped to the chase. She said, well, I don't know, Mom, what would other kids do about it? Then there was the other time that Angela had gotten this book for Christmas on hairstyles, and especially using them with our daughters. And so they would really get into the hairstyle thing. And so there was this one day that she was working on a particular hairstyle for Lori. And she had tried it once and it didn't work. And she tried another time and it didn't work. And she tried another time and it didn't work. So she's getting a little bit frustrated about this. And Lori, she's sitting here with this going on and on and on. So finally she just turned around and said, Mom, some moms would finally just give up. And Angela looked at her and said, yes, Lori, but some moms will keep going until they get it right. And she looked and said, they would? And so Angela tried a couple more times and then she gave up. So you know that it's working whenever kids start using it against you. So any other techniques that you've been using and experimenting with? Anything going on that either has been working or has not been working very well?
I had to take my son somewhere. Well, I was going somewhere and I had to take him with me. It wasn't for him. I said, well, I'm leaving in 5 minutes. And I was like, I'm out the door in 5 minutes. And then he sat there on the couch and fiddled about for all 2 minutes, and then he really hurried up.
Hey,
Wow, there you go.
yeah,
Thing.
that is a thing.
Usually I'll have to pick him, drag him
No.
or something.
Good. We're gonna be talking more about that technique tonight. Because as we look at tonight's focus, what we're gonna be looking at is giving kids the opportunity to think. In fact, wouldn't it be nice if we could get our kids to think about their life harder than we're thinking about it? Because we as parents, as you know, put an awful lot of time and energy thinking about what our kids ought to be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, how they ought to kind of arrange their lives, which direction they ought to be going. And we just kind of hope that our kids do a little bit of thinking along the way of what they're going to do. And so we want to give our kids as many opportunities that we can to have them do more thinking than we as adults are. But how do you do that? How do you get them to do those thinking and thinking? And we're going to be talking in terms of how do we set limits for our kids so that they actually will stick to those limits. And in the long run, they will learn for themselves how to set proper limits for themselves. Because wouldn't you agree, one of the most important skills that we can give our kids, the most important thing we can pass on to them are some healthy boundaries and limits for their lives. Those limits become really, really important, but it's really a struggle. Because we want to set those healthy limits, but how do you set them so the kids actually live by them? The kids actually are staying within those limits. And so what we want to do is to try to provide limits in a way where they are learning how to set good, healthy limits. Now, we're not talking about, as we get into this, a couple of disclaimers, we're not talking about permissive parenting, where we're turning it all over to them. We're also not talking about absentee parenting, where we're not setting limits for them. But what we are going to do is to try to set some boundaries and set some limits where they'll actually learn how to do it themselves. So, got a story here I want to play for you first to kind of set the stage so you'll have a better idea of what we'll be talking about. Make sure that's on, and here we go.
I'm thinking about this little kid, 16 months of age. Do you remember the little kid who had his head in the spindles? Oh, yeah. Well, it was Thanksgiving when he was at our house. Now the family sat down for the Thanksgiving meal. He had eaten early, so he had the run of the house. And that really bothered him. Why? Because all the adults were tuned in to the adults. He was no longer the center of attraction. He knew how to get it. Do something bad. He had been told now that he does not go up that spiral staircase. So in desperation, while everybody is eating dinner, he goes over to do a little testing. And he looks at that staircase. And he looks at his dad. And he looks at the staircase. He looks at his dad. He starts to put up the foot like this. And his mom said, "Don't you dare." Now, what does that mean? Go ahead and do it. Yes. So he starts up the stairs. Daddy gets up without a word, picks him up, brings him over, puts him between his legs. Now, we've been talking tonight about how important it is for kids to experience consequences, but what are the kind of experiences and consequences that we want kids to have? Love and logic, parents? Those that hurt them? No. Those that leave them uncomfortable? Yes. Leave them uncomfortable. Yes, those are the great teachers. Or how about the ones that leave them inconvenienced? Have all the stories so far left kids both uncomfortable and inconvenienced, but not hurt, okay? So how did they inconvenience this little guy? Dad put him between his legs and actually held him there. Well, he ate. Well, did this little guy take that line down? Oh, no, he's throwing a big fit. So what's dad doing now? Laying on some empathy. He's rubbing his head. Oh, yeah, no, it really makes you mad when you don't get your way, but you'll get to go pretty soon, you know. You notice the lilt in the voice? The more we sing to the kids, the more it says, hey, I can handle the worst you have to offer without even. And so he gets worse, he's throwing a bigger fit. Now, imagine that happening in your family. Who is the person in your family who will finally say these words? Now, you don't have to be so hard on him, he's just a little boy. Yeah. Do you know that nobody in our family would say that? You know why? They don't like to eat by themselves in the garage, that's why. So this little guy had to tough it out, and pretty soon he's all calm, and he was sent on his way. And he went right back over to the staircase. Now he's looking at the staircase. Now he's looking at Dad. Now he's looking at the staircase. Now Dad. Now back at the staircase. He points at the staircase and says, no. And then he turns around and he looks at his dad. I would give anything for a picture of that. If I had a picture of that, it would be up on a great big screen behind me for every one of my presentations, and I would say, look at that face. Look at the love on that face. Look at the contentment on that face. That's the face of a kid who knows his parents love him enough to set some limits.
Gotta be willing to set the limits. It's kind of like, I don't have to explain the importance of it too much, but I do want to use two different illustrations. Setting limits is kind of like sitting in a dark room. And if you can imagine sitting in a room that's completely dark, it's one of those that you can't see your hand in front of your face. All you know is that there's a chair. And you don't know how you got there. You don't know exactly if there's what's around you. So imagine that you get up and you decide you're going to try to find your way in this dark room. So you look around and you finally come to a wall. You kind of push against that wall. You know that that wall's there. And so you work your way around and you find another solid wall. And so finally you get all the way around, you realize, okay, now I know where the room is. Now you got a little bit more security about things. But what happens whenever you push against that wall and it crumbles? Then what? How would it make you feel? Still dark, but the wall's not solid. And that's the way a lot of our kids are. Some of our kids live in situations where the walls keep crumbling around them. What are some of the things that cause the walls of limits to crumble around our kids?
When we change our mind.
Yeah, whenever you're constantly changing where the limit is. Today it may be here, tomorrow it may be over there. What else causes walls to crumble?
So I can give an example. Katie, who's 24 now, and then we took in a foster kiddo when she was 17, and Katie, they're about 3 years apart. And our foster kiddo had a real problem with boundaries because she never had any. She would, the 17-year-old threw herself on the floor one day because I wouldn't fix her bacon at 9 o'clock at night and had a literal pounding on the floor temper tantrum. And we were Thanksgiving or whatever a few weeks later, and Katie said, Jalen, the problem is you've got to figure out where the line is, and you bring your toes right up to it, and you look at the look on her face. And at that point, you know, you can keep pushing or you can back down. And if you don't back down, it's going to end poorly. But if you know where that line is, you'll get anything you want. So, and I mean, these are big kids,
Yeah.
but it's, she was trying to explain to her that that's where the security is. You know where that limit is.
That's right. That's what limits do for our kids, is it provides that safety and security about this is where life resides. And what happens with our kids is if the rules keep changing, the limits keep changing, if one parent is giving one set of boundaries and the other parent's giving a different set of boundaries, or maybe it's the grandparents who are giving another set of boundaries, I mean, whenever that happens, it becomes a very difficult situation for a kid to know, hey, my life is safe, is secure. I know where the safety net is. Some of them, it's kind of like some families I know. You know those families like to count. I mean it. 3, 2. I knew one. They're going 3, 2, 1, 7/8, 1/2. I mean it. 1/4. And they would keep trying to count down. And they never knew where that final boundary was going to be. It's kind of like there's a book that I read several years ago. It's called Piercing the Darkness by Frank Peretti. And it's a fictional account. It's based on spiritual warfare and those kinds of things. And let me just tell you that this is a letter that was imagined that this person wrote. This is a college kid who writes to a former youth minister in the story. She says, "Dear Tom, I want to know something for sure. Right now, I don't. Blame it on pride. When I first entered high school, I relished what I was taught, that I was the ultimate authority in my life, the final arbiter of all truth, the only decider of my values, and that no prior traditions, notions about God, or value systems had any authority over my will, my spirit, my behavior. Maximum autonomy is what they called it. Such ideas can be very inviting. But there was a catch to all this freedom. I had to accept the idea that I was an accident, a mere product of time plus chance. And not only myself, but everything that exists. Once I bought that idea, it was impossible to believe that anything really mattered, for whatever I could do, or create, or change, or enhance would be no less an accident than I was. So where was the value of anything? Of what value was my own life? So all that maximum autonomy wasn't the great liberation and joy I thought it would be. I felt like a kid let loose to play in an infinitely huge yard. I started to wish there was a fence somewhere. At least then I would know where I was. I could run up against it and tell myself I'm in the yard and feel right about it. Or I could climb over the fence and tell myself, uh-oh, I'm outside the yard, and feel wrong about it. Whether right or wrong, and with infinite freedom to run and play, I know I would still stay near the fence. At least then I would know where I was. I would know something for sure. See, this idea of boundaries is more than just trying to keep control of kids and trying to provide some safety for them. It's bigger than that. It affects how they grow and their relationship. In fact, we'll just notice some things. Limits set these expectations for good behavior from children. Kids need to know what the expectations are. And again, the walls are crumbling whenever you don't have good expectations. You don't know what you expect of me today. It may be different what you expect of me tomorrow. And so it really sets those. Limits set attitudes toward authority throughout life. Oh, we got a big problem with folks who don't respect authority, don't they? How many of those were because they did not have good limits set in their life? Limits develop the internal locus of control necessary as a person grows. Setting good boundaries and limits for kids while they're young sets the foundation for someone to become more self-disciplined and set their own boundaries as they grow older in life. And finally, limits are the foundation of having successful relationships. How many relationships fall apart because I don't know where the boundaries are. I don't know where the limits are. I don't know where the boundaries are between me and you. Whether it's a dating relationship, just a friendship relationship, whether it's a marriage relationship, I don't know where the boundaries are. And so we give our kids the opportunity to learn those limits. So how do we do that? I want to listen now to a story about a mom. Now this is about a specific, an especially difficult kid. And we're going to talk about the difficult kid because if you get it for the difficult kid, then maybe for some of us whose kids aren't quite as difficult, we can kind of water it down and kind of adjust it instead of trying to start with the real easy ones and then try to beef it up from there. So listen to what this mom does in order to set limits. And then we'll talk about what that looked like and how to set those limits for ourselves.
How about a real nasty kid? Now, what do you do with a kid that won't do anything for you? When I was a therapist down in South Carolina, this woman comes in with this kid. He must have been about 15, huge, almost 6 foot tall, about 180 pounds. One of the biggest kids I've ever seen, and one of the nastiest as well. They get in the car, they'd be driving along, and pretty soon mom would hear this. Take me to McDonald's. Just like that. And she'd say, no, I told you no. Oh yeah, you get to buy anything you want, but no, you're too selfish. You anytime you want something, you pull, you get it, but no. Listen, young man, if you don't get something civil tongue in your mouth, you're walking now, I mean it. Okay. He cracks open the door, 65 miles an hour. She slams on the brakes, pulls over. He gets out, starts walking. She's thinking, fine. She starts driving back up on the road, but before all 4 tires hit the pavement, something went through her mind. What do you suppose that was? Run him over. But then a split second later, she thought, no, somebody's going to kidnap him, and that's a bad thing. And pulls up the side of the road, starts backing up. He gets back in the car. She says something intelligent like, see, I mean business. They drive a little bit down the road. What's missing now? What does the kid not have on? Seatbelt. There you go. Now, what is mom forced to do now? Give the kid the seat belt lecture. Raise your hand if you've ever given or received the seat belt lecture. It goes something like this. Which people, for crying out loud. How many times I tell you where if we have to stop real fast, we can exit. You're gonna fly right through that windshield. Then you wish you had your seatbelt on. And what's a teenager say to that? Okay, it's my body. Then you're forced to give the medical care and insurance payment lecture. Oh yeah, it's your body, but I pay your medical bills, I pay your medical insurance. I'm the one who's gonna be taking care of you. You're gonna be in a wheelchair, diaper out of bedpan, cleaning. Then you wish you had your seatbelt on. Did you know there's actually part of the human brain that contains lectures? And it remains dormant until you either become a parent or a teacher. Then it gets activated. They come off your lips just like magic. What are some of the other lectures? Well, we talked about the toothbrushing lecture. We talked about starving kids in China. Oh, you keep looking that way at me? You know what's going to happen. Your face is going to get stuck. Here's another variant on the toothbrushing lecture. Let me smell your breath. I felt your toothbrush. It's dry. Oh. So I suppose that your friends jumped right off the cliff. And you're just gonna follow them right off that cliff. Oh, you have so much potential, but no, you just won't apply yourself. Listen, for crying out loud, you're in kindergarten right now, but college is right around the corner. Isn't it amazing how easy they come? What does Love and Logic say? Here's a little sound bite for you, so you can remember it. Replace lectures with enforceable statements. Replace lectures with enforceable statements. Replace lectures with enforceable statements. Well, she went home and she made a discovery one evening. Well, she kind of helped me make this discovery because we talked about it a little bit, throwing some ideas around in the counseling sessions, and she made this realization. She realized that she was spending all of her time and energy trying to control things that she couldn't control in a million years. And therefore had no time or energy left over to control the things that she really could. Isn't it amazing how kids that are tough like this can trick us into trying to control things that we can't? Like the tone of their voice or the way their face looks or their attitude. She actually made a couple lists. One she headed controls, all the things that I can control beyond a shadow of a doubt. Another list, it was titled wishes, all the things that I wished I could control, but I can't. If you have a tough kid, a really difficult situation at home, think it might be wise to get home and do this, just to get yourself refocused. I do it from time to time when things come up in my life. How about if I name some things and you yell out control, if you can control them beyond a shadow of a doubt? If you can't control them beyond a shadow of a doubt, what do you yell? Wish. Are you ready? The color of a kid's hair. Wish. Tone of their voice. The tone of your voice. Well, sometimes, yeah, control. How about whether a kid takes out the trash? How about whether you engineer a situation that makes the kid wish he took out the trash? How about whether a kid wants to learn? Wish. How about if you model being a learner at home for your kids by reading in front of them? Yeah, absolutely. Again, the bottom line is the only thing that I can control is myself. And it's amazing. Here we come right back to enforceable statements. They're a wonderful tool for helping us stay focused on what we really can control. How about if I share some enforceable statements that might solve some problems for people? Well, how about this one? I allow people to use the family car when they've made a deposit equal to the insurance deductible into my account. Can I make that happen? Yes or no? So if I can make it happen, I want you to scream out, yes. Okay. How about this one? Hey, I'll be willing to listen when your voice is calm like mine. Absolutely. I will love you regardless of how easy or how hard you make your own life. That's the one you say to the kid when they say, I don't care about school. That's the one that says, sweetie, I love you beyond a shadow of a doubt. But when you make your life sad, it makes your life sad. Let me think of another one here. How about this one? Sweetie, I'll be happy to do all the things I do for you around here when I feel treated with respect. I'll be happy to do the things I do for you, take you places you want to go when I don't have to worry about bickering in the car. I charge to listen to fighting. I knew a mom who did that, and then she'd just look at her watch and smile. Yes. And the kids would start fighting, and she, after a while, she had them so conditioned, she'd look at her watch and say, she'd say, yes, yes. And they go, shut up, man, shut up. We're gonna do chores. Things changed in this house. Getting back to this big tough kid. He goes to the refrigerator one day. He opens it up. What's in there? Carrots, celery, Spam. Did you know that Spam is an incredibly powerful behavior management tool? Mom, when are you gonna buy some stuff for me? Sweetie, be happy to buy you the things you like when I feel treated with and the chores are done. See, if you're gonna use an enforceable statement, tack on the chores too, you get a freebie. He goes in his room, what does he find? Underwear standing up all by themselves. Mom, when are you gonna wash my clothes? Oh, sweetie. Be happy to wash your clothes, do those things when I feel treated with respect and the chores are done. Is she getting really creative here? No, she's memorized this one statement. And in fact, you know, you could almost run a house on that, couldn't you? I mean, why make it more complicated than you have to? I mean, really good parents don't use a lot of skills. They just have maybe a handful of small things they say that are really powerful. They don't make it complicated. Well, he comes up and says, hey, we're gonna go ride motorcycles. You take me over there, we're gonna ride dirt bikes. What does she say? Oh, I'll be happy to take you to places you want to go when I feel treated with respect and the chores are done. Don't forget that freebie, right? Now, is he thanking her? Is he saying, Mom, I love the way you're setting limits with me? What does he do? Oh, I hate you. He runs into his room. It sounds like World War III in there. He actually kicks a hole in the wall. Now, what do you do when you don't know what to do? Delay the consequence. Now, I don't have enough time to describe what happened here, but it took some time of thinking. She put together a plan. All I can say is this. He learned a very valuable life skill. Drywall repair and painting.
The difference we're talking about here is the difference between fighting words and thinking words with your kids. And what fighting words do is fighting words are those that say no to something. Because just watch, throughout this, I want you to look at your kids' eyes as you practice this technique. Because you'll know that your kids are thinking more than you are about what you see in their eyes. Whenever you say no, what do you usually see in your kids' eyes? It's what we used to see in our kids' eyes. Yeah, I mean, they get fiery. You know, the pupils start dilating. Bring it on. That's what the fighting words do. I mean, try it with your spouse, or your boss, or someone like that. But what thinking words will do, if you'll use a thinking word, and thinking words are these, they say no by saying yes to something else. They set the limit, not because you said no to something, but because you said yes to something else. And if you use a thinking word correctly, notice what your kids will do. Oftentimes they will stop, and their eyes will kind of go off to one side. And then they'll turn back and they'll move forward. Because they got to stop and they got to get the thinking going. The brain will start kind of kicking in. Now remember, there are just certain things that you have control over, and there are things you don't have control over. So, for example, you got control over body. Do you have control over someone else's body placement? No, you tell somebody, sit up straight. What are they liable to do? Slouch, smooth down the chair, you know, something like that. You ain't got control over body placement. How about muscle control? Anybody ever tried to pick up a child whenever they're throwing a tantrum? Stand up! Stand up! I said stand up. Or you tell them, hurry up, we gotta go. You tell the child, hurry up. What gear do they put it in? I'm coming, I'm hurrying, really I am. Yeah, can't control muscle control, and you can't control thinking processes. This one is especially true as kids get to be teenagers. Because kids will start to say things about what they're thinking, and they may not even think that way, but they know it's going to get a reaction out of it. I think school's stupid. I think I'm just going to drop out. You know what? You're not going to give me any more allowance? I tell you, I guess I'm just going to have to go sell drugs. What are you doing here if your kid says something like that? I'm just going to have to go sell drugs. Or I'm just going to drop out of school. What do you say? Okay. Oh, man. Yeah. Just one little one line here. In fact, I've got another handout up here. I'll put it up here and you can pick it up on your way out. If your kid says something that's really ridiculous like that, go ahead and agree with them. Just say, hey, that's an option. Kid would come up to parents and says, I need more allowance. I just don't get it up. So I said, well, you know, we talk about allowances at the end of the year, and I'll be happy to talk about that whenever the end of the year gets here. But no, not right now. What do you mean not right now? I told you, we talked about those at the end of the year. Well, but I need the money now. I'm just going to have to go buy drugs or go sell drugs or something. And Dad looked at him and said, well, that's an option. The kid goes, what do you mean that's an option? He said, well, yeah, I mean, that's an option. I didn't say it was a good one, but that's an option. So you just kind of go into that's an option. Let the kid, you know, deal with the ridiculousness of something that they said. So there's, you know, you can't control these behaviors. What you can't control is yourself. And I want you to notice that's what God does to us as a parent. First of all, notice Garfield here. John says, I wonder if I'd miss you if you went away. He looks up, lays back down. Nice try. Notice what God does. Exodus 19. Moses went up to God, and the Lord called him from the mountain. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, If you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you'll be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you'll be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Do you hear the limits? And you hear the positive statement of the limits. You're going to be my people. Deuteronomy 7, therefore take care to follow the commands, decrees, and laws I give you today. If you pay attention to these laws and be careful to follow them, then the Lord your God will keep his covenant of love with you as he swore to your forefathers. He will love you and bless you and increase your numbers. Listen to the yes statements and what limits it put on them. Matthew 6:33, Jesus said, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Hear the limits? Matthew 7, ask and it'll be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. He who seeks finds. To him who knocks, the door will be open. And then in 1 John 1, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his son, purifies us from all sins. That's how God parents us. He says, I'm going to give you the yes statements, and that will set the boundaries for you. It's the Titus 2 passage that we talked about before, where it says the grace of God teaches us to say no to all the ungodliness in this world, because he gave us the yes. See, as parents, we can focus on whether or not we're controlling our kids. We can make sure that they are towing the line, that they're staying within the boundaries that we set for them, or we can focus on ways to effectively set and enforce limits that will stick and lay lifelong foundations for those. And isn't that what we want to do? Is set some limits so that first of all, we can actually make them stick. And secondly, it will help them set limits for their own lives. So how do we do that? Again, we're talking about fighting words versus thinking words. Basically, what a thinking word does is I say what I mean what I say, and I will do what I say I'll do. You hear the one that's controlling himself? I will do what I say I will do. I will do what I mean, or I mean what I say. It's like Beetle Bailey here. He says, guy says, I've decided I'm a pacifist. The army can't make me fight. Beetle says, right, they can't make you fight. But they can haul you right out of here and put you smack down in the middle of where the fighting is. Then you can make up your own mind. All right. So how do you tell the difference between fighting words and thinking words? Well, fighting words tell a child what he or she must do. It usually starts with the words you. You will do this. You will do that. Those are typically fighting words. Thinking words are telling the child what he or she may choose to do. Because these are the limits that I'm setting. And that gets us to enforceable statements. Enforceable statements tell the child what I will do, not what they have to do. And it will tell the child what I will do and what they're welcome to do. And that's why the statement, I'll be happy to do what I do for you. I'll be happy to get the things I do for you when, and then you fill in the blank with what the when is. Now, I love this statement. In fact, this is the technique that I love the most. And he's right. You can just about run a household on this one. I'll be happy to do the things I do for you. I'll be happy to take the places I need that you want to go when I feel treated with respect and the choice. Do you notice the way it's phrased? I'll do it when I feel treated with respect. What if you said, I'll do it whenever you treat me with respect? Well, now what happens?
5 minute niceness.
Well, yeah. And then the kid gets to decide whether they're treating you with respect. I am treating you with respect. No, see, the key is not whether they think they're treating me with respect. The key is whether I feel treated with respect. Because now the boundary, the limit is I've got to feel it. You don't get to decide how I feel treated with respect. No, I'm just not feeling it. By the way, the chores aren't done. You gotta put that in. I like this for you. And you get a lot of chores done that way, by the way. Angela always used one. You know how kids come up and they always talk about, I'm bored. Somebody give you that one this summer? I'm bored. Well, what our kids learned real quickly, you didn't say that at our house. In fact, they would have friends over. And the friend would say, I'm bored. They said, don't say that. Don't let mom hear you say that. Well, why not? Because mom said, oh, when you're bored, when I hear you're bored, I'm going to give you some chores to do. They learn pretty quick. You don't say I'm bored because they got chores.
Because if you can't think of something for you to do, I can think of something for you to do.
And so
So every time they said, I'm bored, I went, yes, and then went, oh, no.
that's right. The other one that worked real well for her is our two youngest, they were the typical sibling fighters, you know, they just always got on each other's nerves. So she'd take them to the store and they'd always get into it. And so she told us, says, you know, she finally just started looking at her watch. She said, yes. She was standing in the line and they're going after it. And she was one, she went, yes. And the person in the line in front of her looked back there and said, what are you doing? Pretty soon the two of them quit. Because they knew that what that meant was the longer you fight, the more chores you're going to do whenever you get home. You have to pay me back with chores. Here are the limits. I'll be happy to do what I do for you when I feel treated with respect and the chores are done. Story about Lori Mannon. Lori was in one of these love and logic classes. She decided, we talked about enforceable statements, and so they were on their way home. We were having elders and ministers meetings on Wednesday nights after class, and so she was taking her 4 kids home by herself. And something happened in the car that happened quite frequently in the car on the way home. They started getting into little fights and stuff. But what happened was her oldest was sitting up in the front seat. The one of the middle kids was sitting in the second seat. They had like a minivan or a van that they were sitting in. And then the two of them were sitting in the back seat. And the oldest reached over and turned on the radio. So the radio starts playing. Well, the two in the back seat, one of them had grabbed a toy from the other one, and they started getting, oh, I want that back. Oh, I want to play with it. No, I want to play with it. Well, the one in the middle decided he wasn't going to be left out, so he sat in the middle seat, just going, blah, 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 blah. Well, the front one, he couldn't hear the radio anymore, so he turned up the volume some more. Well, the two in the back, they're still trying to get the toy away from each other, and the one in the middle, he couldn't quite hear himself anymore, and so he got louder. Blah, 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 blah. And so finally, the first one turned it up a little bit more, and he turned around and said, would you all be quiet? And finally, Mom just said, hey, wait, watch this. So she pulled the car over to the side of the road. And she turned off the radio, and she turned off the key to the van. And the two in the back, they're fighting over the toy, and the middle one's going, blah, 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 blah. Well, finally, for two in the back, they stop and say, wait a minute. What's happening? And the middle one going, blah, 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 blah. And he looks up and says, Mom, what happened? And so she turned around and very quietly said, well, you know, it's really hard to drive whenever all that's going on inside the car. I'll be happy to get the rest of the way home whenever we can do it peacefully. And she turned back around and just sat there. The rest of them were very quiet. So she started the engine, she turned the radio up just a little bit, pulled back on the road, and she told me afterwards, she said that was the first time we'd gotten home in complete peace and quiet in a long time. She said that's not what she had done before. She had pulled it over and took them all out, gave them a big spanking, then got back inside the car, had to deal with all that noise going back home anyway. But setting those limits. We were at, they have those buddy days at schools. It's at the end of the year and they have all these fun things. Well, this particular year, Angela and I used to help with the buddy day every year for our kids' elementary school. And this particular year, they always had, this train thing, where you have the lawnmower kind of thing, and then you've got these barrels that they cut out and made cars to go behind it. I always wanted to be a train engineer whenever I was growing up. I always had a little toy train to play with. But this year, they offered to let me drive the train. Oh man, I got that. That was it. I mean, I got to drive the train. Well, the teachers, whenever they heard they were having the train back, they go, no, not again. It's always all sorts of trouble, that train. Why do we have to have the train? Well, we had the train. And at the end of the day, teachers came up and said, that seemed to go pretty smooth. And Angela said, yeah, it did. Well, how is that? We always have trouble with the train. She said, no, there's no trouble. She said, When the kids came up to get on the train, I told them, anyone who would like to ride the train is gonna line up right here. And those kids got in that line. And then whenever the line got longer, then she said, I'll be happy for those who want to ride the train. I'll be happy for you to ride the train if you line up against this wall over here. So off they would go over against the wall. And then before they would get on the train, Angela would say, okay, those of you who would like to ride the train all the way through will sit down flat on their bottoms. She said, you know, we didn't have any, well, she said, we did have one. She said, we had one child that decided to stand up on the train, and I waved my hands, and she said, my husband stopped the train, and we went over and took the child off the train and went back, and then they finished the ride. She said, we didn't have trouble with that the rest of the day. It was incredible. It's a fun day. I got to get off the train. You know, I couldn't find an engineer hat. I've always wanted, you know, the right kind of hats, and I've never had an engineer. So if anybody wants to get me an, my son had an engineer's hat, but it was too small for me, so I didn't get to wear it. All right, I want to play another story for you about how this mom set limits.
My mother was much like a wall, you know, when we talk about limits. She set limits for me, and I remember most vividly the night of graduation from junior high school. I was getting to be a pretty big kid. And we grew up in a very poor family. We lived in this little garage, 5 of us. And we didn't have a lot of clothes, but I had a pair of jeans that I wore to school every day, and I had a nice pair of black pants that I wore for good. And I had stored my black pants all wadded up in a little ball somewhere, and I brought them to my mother that evening, and I said, iron my pants. And she said, what? This is iron my pants. And she said, what? I said, please iron my pants. And she said, no. Wait a minute, this is important. This is graduation. She said, I realize that, Jimmy. And she says, I'd be glad to iron your pants anytime when I haven't already used up the time doing something else for you. And she said, this week I used up that ironing time doing the dishes for you that you've been forgetting to do. So she said, check me out another time when I haven't used up the time. I said, well, you don't want me to go with wrinkled pants? And she said, no, I sure don't. But given a choice between wrinkled pants and doing double time, I vote for wrinkled pants. Well, I tried everything. Don't you care? Don't you love me? And all that kind of stuff. And it didn't work. I mean, she was just like that wall. Her voice didn't get louder. She didn't yell back at me. She didn't move out. She didn't crumble. And finally I said, well, what am I supposed to do? She said, well, some kids iron their own pants. Well, 20 minutes later, I have burned a hole in my only good pair of pants. My last ditch effort with her was to say, see what you made me do? And she said, that's an interesting way to look at it. And she knew a trick about working with people. See, and the trick is anytime there's going to be a problem, you bounce the ball in the other person's court immediately. And the way she would do it is she'd say, what are you going to do? Well, I was hoping I had thought of that first. Now, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. What am I supposed to do? She said, Judy, I don't know either. I said, well, you could buy me a new pair of pants. The stores are still open. And she said, you could buy yourself a new pair of pants out of your allowance. Well, I don't have that much money. Then she said, gee, what are you going to do? No, I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, she said, you could go to that dance in your jeans, or you could stay home. Well, you don't want me to stay home, do you? No, she says, no, I don't want you to stay home, but you're a big boy, and you've got to make that decision. And I finally ended up going to the dance in my jeans, and I was pretty angry. But I noticed something after that. My behavior changed. After that, I started saying things to my mother like, I'll wash the dishes for you if you'll iron my shirt. I even one time said, I'll rake the lawn for you if you'll wash my coat. That kind of stuff. And I was starting to learn that I couldn't make her do things any more than she could make me do things.
One of the things that a lot of my parents try to do is to understand the important principle of taking care of yourself so that you can take care of your kids. You don't hear me fly on a plane, you hear that message, that if those little things fall from up above, you know, the oxygen mask, be sure to put it on yourself first, and then you can do it on your kids. Well, that's one of the important principles as parents. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to have anything to finish taking care of your kids. And one of the things that teaches your kids is how to, for them to take care of themselves. And so what enforceable statements do is it helps the kids know how you're gonna take care of yourself and not allow their SLOs and their misbehavior to wear you down. I love this statement about the kids have got to get the message from you. You can throw anything you want to at me and I can handle it without breaking a sweat. Now, you go in your room later and fall apart, but not in front of your kids. You're gonna do this and you're gonna be able to handle it without any problem. That's why whenever your kids start getting in, they start talking disrespectful or they want to get into an argument with you, then if you really want to talk to them, then you say something like, I'll be happy to talk about this with you whenever your voice is as calm as mine. And it works a lot better to say it that way than to say, I'll be happy to talk about this with you whenever your voice is as calm as mine. It doesn't work that way. As long as you keep it calm. By the way, it works on bosses and spouses as well. I'll be happy to talk about this with you whenever your voice is as calm as mine. Told you about the eyes. One dad had been in our classes, and he had his oldest daughter was particularly strong-willed. And one of the things that she liked to do was she would go to Bible class or any place they would go, she hated to wear her shoes. And so anytime they would go someplace, first thing that come off of her shoes. And she'd go to Bible class, and whenever he'd go and pick her up from Bible class, there she would be without any shoes on, and he'd have to search all over the room trying to find where she kicked these shoes off. Well, he got to class that night to pick her up, and he remembered what we said about enforceable statements. So he stopped, and he said, okay, honey, I'll be happy to take you to go find mom when you have your shoes on. And he said, she stopped. She looked up like this. And then she went and she found her shoes. And she brought the shoes and said, okay, let's go. He said, no, remember, I'll be happy to go take you to find mom when you have your shoes on. And so she stopped again and she looked up like that. And then she sat down and put her shoes on. He said, it was unbelievable. He said, that's the first time that we haven't had a battle over the shoes. Well, the same thing happened the next Sunday morning. And they'd gotten into the auditorium and they sat down in the pew, and the first thing that went was the shoes. And so whenever the assembly was over and she wanted to go back and find her friends in the foyer, he said, whoa, wait a minute, honey. We'll go back and find your friends as soon as you have your shoes on. And she stopped. She looked up. And he said, I didn't believe you about the eyes. He said, that wasn't going to happen. He said, she did. She kind of looked up, and then she went, she found her shoes, sat down, put them on, and off she went. He said, I don't know what happened. We don't have battles over shoes anymore. Try the enforceable statements. It'll give your kids a chance to think more than you do. So here's your assignments. Practice some more with helping your kids solve their own problems. Remember to keep those problems in their laps. Then catch yourself using fighting words and thinking words. Try to use those thinking words instead. And then tell your kids what you will do and what they are invited to do. And next week, we're going to talk about a really fun technique. You have those situations where your kids always do things that annoy you. I mean, and you just know they're going to do it because it's always kind of the same time, in the same way, it's just kind of ongoing. And I'm going to give you a technique for how to break the cycle and have a lot of fun doing it. All right, but this week, remember to tell your kids what you're going to do and what you are willing for them to choose to do, and help them set those goals. Go have fun parenting. It's supposed to be fun.